Blog Talk Radio.
Michamo Afurakanu Afuraitkaitnut Neye AMANSEM da Medinde Ojirafo Kwesi Ranem Pata Akan Aquamumai Amanuka Etifi Mu Ojirafo Odwiraman Mu. Greetings to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is AMANSEM Day, Affairs of the Nation Day. My name is Ojirafo Kwesi Ranem Pata Akan. Odwiraman of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Within Odwiraman, the Purified Nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you once again for tuning into the broadcast. We've opened up a chat room. If you have any questions or comments and you'd like to interact in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. We have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have on Joda Monday nights, we have Akan Anato, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion. On that broadcast, we deal specifically with the Akan expression of ancestral religion. First and foremost, of course, because we are Akan. Secondly, because of the misinformation being propagated regarding Akan cosmology, ritual practice, culture, ancestral religion, and so forth, not only from individuals in the Western Hemisphere, but also those on the continent of Afuraitkaitnut who have been infected with white pseudo-religion, Christianity, Islam, Hebrewism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and so forth, white culture in general, and thus that infection perverts their presentation of ancestral religion. So we deal with ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion that deals with our origins, our ancestral origins from ancient Kanat, the Kan land, the Kanit land, a title of ancient Nubia. Some of our people migrated from Kanat 2,000 years ago after the fall of Kemet in northern Kanat, reestablished ourselves in the Western Hemisphere or Western region of the continent of Afuraitkaitnut, Africa, reestablished the Kanat Empire of Ghana a couple of thousand years ago. After Muslim invasions, centuries later, some of our people migrated further south, reestablished our Kanat civilization in the forest belt and savanna regions. Centuries later, some of our people were taken from those regions into North Central South America, the Caribbean, and Europe, the Western Hemisphere, during the Amusuo Kessie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. And this is how some of us as Akan people ended up in the Western Hemisphere. However, we maintained our ancestral religious traditions. Thus, the Akan tradition in Suriname and South America is called Weemti, from the Akan term Weemti. In Jamaica, the Akan tradition is called Obia, from the Akan term Obai. In North America, in the United States, the Akan ancestral religion, our tradition is called Hoodoo, from the Akan term Undu, meaning medicine from roots, trees, plant life. It also means to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession, spirit communication. We also call the tradition conjure, from the term kanche, in the Akan language, meaning to utter incantations to bring down the spirits of the Abosom, the deities, and the Nanano Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our direct spirit genetic blood circles. We maintained our ancestral religious practices, which empowered and guided us on the best means by which to wage war against the whites and their offspring and force the end of enslavement in the Western Hemisphere. So we deal with Akan Anato, ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion on Joda Monday nights. On Abinada Tuesday nights, we have our broadcast Ojira, which means purification. We deal with ancestral religion in general, not just the Akan expression, but ancestral religion in general, wherever Afuraitkaitnut people, African black people exist in the world. Our ancestral religious practices impact every aspect of our lives. So we deal with Ojira purification. We say that Ojira purification operationalizes Afuraitkaitnut, African ancestral religion, or what we call Nanasom. Purification operationalizes Nanasom. Ancestral religion in essence, is the ritual incorporation of divine law, the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and thus realign ourselves with divine order. So the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion, or the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. Ojira, purification operationalizes nanason. Purification operationalizes our practice of ancestral religion, ritually incorporating law and ritually restoring balance. As we execute our divine function in creation, as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, as cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being with our specific functions, we seek to align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day. That is our ancestral culture. It is the divine acceptance, the law, the love of order, and the divine rejection, the hatred of disorder and its purveyors. So we seek to align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day so that we can continue to execute our function properly within creation. When we make legitimate mistakes, we engage the ritual process to incorporate divine law and restore divine balance to those thoughts, intentions, and actions. Thus, ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives as we seek moment to moment to align ourselves and realign ourselves with divine order. So we talk about the purification of concepts, ritual practice, culture, every aspect of ancestral religion as it impacts every aspect of our lives. Eguada, which is Marketplace Day, that broadcast is Awukuda, Akuada Wednesday night. We showcase Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African businesses, organizations, and institutions who are positively impacting our community, those who maintain their ancestral religious values in the context of their service to the community. We also deal with the philosophical foundation of economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values. We have thus published our Okom economic development model, which is an approach to economic development which is holistic because it is rooted in our ancestral religious values. We have our operation in the Okom economic development model, which is a model you can download for free, of course, to study the videos, the 4-part series on Okom economic development model that we published, released on YouTube, on the Blog Talk Radio channel. Part of that process is engaging the ritual practices to realign ourselves with our culture, the divine acceptance, the law, love of order, the divine rejection, hatred of disorder. When we become realigned, then we have a natural inclination, natural propensity, natural instinct to support economic development within our community. And thus we utilize a strategy that's most effective, which we call Starve the Beast and Feed the Pride. We make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have potentially wasted with the whites in their offspring, and then we starve the beast and feed the pride. We reallocate those funds away from the white businesses and direct them to the business, organization, or institution of the week. We target one Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit business, organization, or institution per week for optimal capital infusion. So when one person transfers or reallocates $10 away from a white business this week and directs it to a black business, the black business receives $10 in capital. When 1,000 people engage the same process, then different white businesses lose $10,000 and it's directed to that black business, and a $10,000 infusion of capital will allow that black business to hire black people permanently and full-time within a 7-day period, serve us at a greater capacity, expand their products and services so we can always access them as opposed to going to our enemies. It's a win-win situation, of course. If we do not engage this process on a consistent basis of starving the beast and feeding the pride, then by default, we leave the funds in the hands of our enemies, the whites, and their offspring. By default, we are financing our own oppression, which is insane. So we must engage that process deliberately on a regular basis, a consistent basis, starving the beast and feeding the pride. So This broadcast tonight is Yauda Thursday, also called Yada and Abada. We have AMANSEM, Affairs of the Nation. What we deal with on this broadcast is a nationist approach to our issues as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people within Odwiraman. Odwira means purification in the language of ancient Kemet. It also means the celebrated ceremony of purification. Mine or Omine means nation. It also means the West, the land of the setting sun. Odwiraman is the purified nation in the Western Hemisphere. This is our designation for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. Those who, quote unquote, went to the West, the land of the setting sun. In ancient Kanit and Kemet, the West is the land where the sun sets and goes into the quote unquote underworld. But when death occurs, there's also the potential for renewal and resurrection, just as Alsar resurrects and so forth. He's Kaniti Amintu, the first of the Westerners, but he shows us how to overcome the negativity and become an honored ancestor or ancestress. He also deals with resurrection as well, restoration and renewal. The same is true with Offset. So when we talk about Odwiraman, the purified nation in the Western Hemisphere, this is what we're dealing with. We have a unique approach to solving our issues based on our locative identity. We understand what an AMANNE nation is. And tonight we're getting into AMANNE ANATO, the pedigree of revolutionary-resolutionary nationism. If you look in our Odwiraman Afashe Nhoma, the book Odwiraman from our second annual Odwiraman Purified Nation of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut in the Western Hemisphere Conference, we have a yearly conference around the summer solstice in June for Odwiraman, the Purified Nation. And our focus is AMANNE Nationism, which is the purification of nationalism. Last year was our second annual conference. This year is the third annual conference coming up in June. We have 3 annual conferences throughout the course of the year. We have Hoodoo Wars, the Hoodoo Nation Festival in October, dealing with Akan Ancestral Religion in the Western Hemisphere in North America. We have the Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference, where we deal with the various traditions born of our spirit genetic blood circles. Hoodoo, which is the Akan tradition, Juju, which is the Yoruba tradition, Voodoo, which is the Ebe and Phone tradition, Wanga, which is the Ovambo tradition, and Gengan, which is the Fang tradition, Grigri, which is the Bambara tradition, and so forth, the Gullah and Geechee traditions, which are the Gola and Kisi traditions, and so forth. Those forms of ancestral religious practice we have maintained in our blood circles here in the Western Hemisphere since we were forced into this region. We deal with those traditions at Echisan Ancestral Religious Reversion, and then that's around the spring equinox and around the summer solstice in June. We have Odwiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. That conference deals with Amansesew nation building, restoration, rooted in AMANNE Nationism, which is the purification of nationalism. We publish a book and release it at every conference and give away a free copy of the book. When you look at the second publication from our second annual Odwiraman conference, you can download the free ebook version, and we'll put the link in the chat room. There's certain information we want to go over in that text tonight, which we're going to get into right now. If you go to page 9, you go to page 8. We want to lay that foundation for what the AMANNE is and talk about the AMANNE ANATO. As we state on page 8, as an AMANNE of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut Africans in the Western Hemisphere, interfacing with this region of Asase Afua, our fertile earth mother, and blending blood circles during and after the Musuo Kessie, the Great perversity, the enslavement era. We have a distinct character which gives nuance to our functioning individually and as a unique and sovereign collective of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut Africans in the world. This is that philosophical foundation of what an Oman is. We say on page 9, the Oman, the nation, is a living, breathing entity with a spirit governing all who are a component part. The nature or customs of the Oman, the nation, are abiding and have staying power because they are rooted in the unchangeable and unalterable divine order of creation. They are thus monumental. We embrace who we are individually as cells with unique functions to execute within the great divine body of the Supreme Being while functioning interdependently with one another. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, African black cells only, of course, people cells. We then adhere to the collective spirit of the Oman, the nation, that governs us. This is AMANNE, which we define as nationism. Nationism, AMANNE, nationism, properly expressed as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, or African black nationism, is rooted in reality. It answers the question of why Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut Africans possessing every skill set necessary to build, sustain, defend an independent nation on our own territory have not coordinated these skills and affected the desired result. Nationism breaks the impotence of secular, amorphous, and messianic nationalisms. Nationism is born of our divine function as Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, Africans in creation, and the unfolding of creation through our spiritual, familial, social, economic, and political life expressions. Nationism is the purification of nationalism. When we talk about an Oman being a living, breathing entity, as we always say, your organ is an entity which is governed by a specific energy complex, male and female forces, abosom, Marisha, Vodou, and so forth. The cells are children of that organal structure. The organs within the great divine body of the Supreme Being are the abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, the deities, the Ntorotu, misnomer, Neteru, Netetu, and so forth. We as cells, children of those organal structures, support the functions of the organ that we are a component part of. We interact interdependently upon one another as cells within that organal structure, and we serve one another, but at the same time, we are supporting the function of the overall organ that we are a component part of, and when we serve that function, we're serving the whole body at the same time. As a unique collective within a specific organal structure, we're part of a quote-unquote Oman, or a nation that's governed by a specific energy complex. A nation, in reality, an Oman, in reality, properly defined, is governed by the same process. We were forced into the Western Hemisphere, but at some point, our Nanano Nsamanfo, our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, directed us, guided us to a specific region of the Earth Mother's body in this Western Hemisphere. We were directed to coalesce, and this continuously happens, directed to coalesce and blend ancestral blood circles so that we may bring back ancestresses and ancestors of our spirit genetic blood circles into these unions and into this region that we have coalesced into. We blend ancestral blood circles, draw these ancestresses and ancestors back. We take in the plant life, animal life, mineral life for food as well as medicine from this region of the Earth Mother's body. We interface with the Earth Mother divinities in this region of their body. We interface with the unique expression, energetic emanations, and dispensation of the abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, as they manifest in a unique expression in the Western Hemisphere. For example, how they manifest in a riverine area, a mountainous region, desert region, in a region where there's snow and so forth, and how they manifest in that kind of region, which is different from the way they manifested on the continent and so forth. Some areas similar, some areas unique and different and so forth. We take in that energy that informs and infuses within our people through spirit possession, spirit communication, and through the blending of ancestral blood circles. We give birth to children whose bodies literally carry that unique configuration of energy based on that coalescing. So we have forged a locative identity in this region of the Earth Mother, in this region of her body, the fertile Earth Mother's body. the interfacing with the unique expression of the abosom, the blending of ancestral blood circles, the taking in of plant life, animal life, mineral life for food as well as medicine and so forth, interfacing with the spirits of these animals with regard to Achineko, animal totems. We have forged a locative identity, a unique expression of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit identity based on this location, physically and spiritually. Therefore, we have a unique expression of culture, expression of ancestral religion that is spirit genetically inherited, transcarnationally inherited through successive incarnations since we have been here over the past 300 years. We therefore have a unique approach to solving our problems. We have a unique approach to nation building and restoration. Our approach, when rooted firmly in our ancestral religious values which govern every aspect of our lives, is what births our unique approach, which we call AMANNE or nationism, the purification of nationalism. There's a difference. And tonight we're talking about the ANATO, which means the pedigree of AMANNE, the pedigree of nationism, revolutionary-resolutionary nationism. If you look at a difference, when you look at secular nationalism rooted in white political dogma and social doctrines, inclusive of the various strains and iterations of socialism and white socialism and blackface, it has never and will never lead us to this critical realization of what an AMANNE is. Amorphous nationalism, inclusive of a rudderless pan-African nationalism without an anchor in our unique spirit-genetic identity, our transcarnational identity, our very purpose for living and functioning, has never and will never lead us to achieving our goals. Messianic nationalism, rooted in the pseudo-religions and pseudo-spiritualities of the whites and their offspring, and blackened up versions of these pseudo-religions and pseudo-spiritual perversions vested in a pseudo-prophetic leader or a series of leaders, have never and will never lead us to achieving our goals. Our acquired nationalism has been a pathetic imitation of the quote-unquote nationalism of our absolute enemies, the whites and their offspring. This is why in our text we define AMANNE, what a nation actually is. We show that terminology in the Akan language, but we also show it in the Medusa, the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet. And we give that proper definition, as we just spoke about. But there is a pedigree. There's a difference of how we have approached nation building. There are different, quote-unquote, streams of thought, and some people know about two of the major streams, the nationalists and the integrationists. We focus on the nationists, which most people don't deal with. And that's the pedigree we want to get into tonight. If you look in our book, Hoodoo People, we touch on that pedigree even from the Akan perspective, and you can do the same thing with your tradition as well. We talk about, for example, if you look in the index portion, the New York Rebellion of 12,712, so-called 1712, where 9 out of the 21 Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut Africans who were captured after the rebellion was over were found to have Akan, Akradin, or soul names and so forth. Numerous Akan people who escaped enslavement and established independent nations away from the plantations, such as in the Great Dismal Swamp in Virginia and North Carolina, independent nations wherein our people lived in freedom and defended their freedom with their own militias intergenerationally. The Great War waged by Okunfo Yao, Warrior Yao, Nat Turner in Southampton, Virginia, which resulted in the massacre of numerous white enslavers. Nat Turner, Okunfo Yao's Akan, the freedom movement of Nana Abena Araminta, Harriet Tubman, who was also Akan, who led hundreds of enslaved Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut to freedom, not only with the Underground Railroad piece, but we also talked about the raid on the Combahee River in the regions near North South Carolina and so forth, where she led a regiment, an armed regiment of the quote-unquote Union Army, the first female to do so, where they freed over 700 enslaved Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people. The Great Uprising planned by Okunfo Kwabena, warrior Kwabena, so-called Telemake Denmark Visi. He organized over 9,000 Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut Africans to revolt against the white enslavers in South Carolina, one of the largest organized revolts in the true history of America. Another Akan Okunfo warrior and so forth. We talk about the Gullah Wars in Florida. They waged war against the United States Army and bankrupted the Treasury of the United States. The United States Army waged war against the Gullah for decades and were never able to drag them back into enslavement. The Hoodoo Wars, launched by Okunfo Yao Nat Turner and Okunfo Kwabena Denmark Visi and Nana Abena Aramita Harriet Tubman and Ogufo Geb, Gabriel Prosper and so forth. These different wars and so forth, all forcing the Civil War to come into being and forcing the end of enslavement. We have a specific pedigree. Some people follow the quote-unquote nationalist pedigree. People even going back to Crispus Attucks and so forth, and even Prince Hall, Masonry and so forth. Martin Delany, a nationalist, also a Christian, dealing with nationalism, trying to figure out different ways to free our people and so forth. You have other members, Marcus Garvey and other people in that fold coming down the pike, coming down the line over the centuries, dealing with nationalism and some form of separatism. But then you also have the integrationists, inclusive of people like Frederick Douglass and the NAACP, and leading into Martin Luther King, and people who are trying to figure out a way to integrate with our enemies, the whites and their offspring, which is pure foolishness. Those are two different kinds of lines of ancestral descent with regard to our approach to solving our issues. Some people identify with the pedigree of black nationalism, also leading to Pan-Africanism with W.E.B. Du Bois and other individuals, but then some people brainwashed into this, identifying with this pedigree of integrationism. And they have two different streams of activity, two different quote-unquote histories and so forth. We come from a different stock. We come from the stock that the whites and their offspring do not want to discuss, and many black people who don't understand because they've been brainwashed with white propaganda and so forth. They've been brainwashed with white pseudo-religion. They've even been brainwashed with blackened up versions of white approaches to organization, social organization, inclusive of secular nationalism, amorphous nationalism, messianic nationalism, and so forth, as we just spoke about. That other stream of thought, and what we're talking about, is the pedigree of revolutionary-resolutionary nationism. It is rooted in our ancestral religious practices. It is rooted in our spirit-genetic identity and ritual culture. It is those groups of people who actually freed our people from enslavement. When we talk about Anato in the Akan language, Ta means to come down, Ana means ancestry, that ancestry coming down through a circle of descent. We are from that pedigree of people who attune to the forces in nature that govern us, the forces that govern order, learn directly from them, not only with regard to medicine and food and so forth, but how to wage war through chemical and biological warfare, the manufacturing of metal armaments and so forth. We freed ourselves from enslavement during our lifetimes, freed ourselves and established independent sovereign nations. That was the first important objective, obviously. Then once we free ourselves, the next step is to go back and free others. And we began those kinds of raids into plantations and so forth, burning down plantations, killing owners and so forth, forcing the United States government eventually to send the armies into these different areas, such as amongst the Hoodoo Wars and the Gullah Wars and so forth, having to engage our people because we were engaging in these various insurrections, wars, resistance movements, and so forth. This forced the country into the Civil War. And of course, thousands of our people entered into that fray because we wanted to grab arms to kill as many crackers as we possibly could. Anything white moving, we wanted to slaughter. And that forced the end of enslavement in the Western Hemisphere. After that process, then our people who were still engaged in their ancestral religious practices, hoodoo and juju and voodoo, wanga and so forth. Those are the individuals who began that process of establishing independent black towns, that independent black town movement. We're not being guided by secular nationalism, messianic nationalism, amorphous nationalism, and so forth. We're not being guided by pseudo-white religion being blackened up to make the fictional cartoon character Jesus black, even though he never existed, or making some other fictional characters like Muhammad black or mulatto to make ourselves feel better about embracing that foolish doctrine and so forth. We're not engaged in that kind of nonsense. We're not looking to the whites and their offspring for methods of social organization and modes of production and so forth, and trying to blacken up socialism, blacken up communism, making excuses for these different approaches to life and living, when in reality we have respect, enough respect, the requisite amount of respect to recognize that we are the founders of civilization. When we attune to the abosom, the orisha, the vodou, the hoodoo spirits, the voodoo spirits, the juju spirits, and so forth, who actually regulate creation harmoniously, when we align with them, incorporate ritually divine law and ritually restore divine balance, when we align with that order through spirit possession and the forces of order enter into our communities ritually, then we can align with how order manifests, and then we can come out of those ritual states, take that same template of divine order that's moving through us when deities possess and communicate, and replicate that in our society as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, and order our society, order our activities. That includes 7 principal values of nation building: Amansesew, methods of food production and preservation, methods of curing disease, establishing a military structure, the institutionalization of our values by establishing training and educational and cultural and ritual institutions, establishing sound systems of governance and jurisprudence, the building of homes and other edifices on acquired land that we defend, and also the manufacturing of clothing. These 7 principal values of nation building that we employ, that we embrace, and so forth, they're informed by our ancestral religious practice. We have a holistic approach to organizing our activities, organizing our lives, because we can attune to the forces in nature that are the embodiments of divine order. That is the pedigree that we come from, going back to the first people who freed themselves from enslavement. We follow those who are actually successful. The integrationists, of course, doomed from the start, seeking to integrate with our enemies. Self-destructive, based in self-hatred, not seeking to free themselves from our enemies, but seeking to assimilate with our enemies based on fear. Black nationalists seeking some form of separation, but rooted in the same Eurocentric philosophies that have enslaved the minds of the people. Blackening up white pseudo-religious characters does not break you from the doctrine put forward by those pseudo-religious characters, and then you begin to shape your quote-unquote nationalism based on a white doctrine that's been blackened up. It was doomed from the beginning. Our people didn't understand that. Some of our people who were engaged in those processes didn't understand that. They were in the minority. In the majority for a period were the integrationists. In the minority were the quote-unquote nationalists. Neither group over the past 150 plus years have achieved any goal with regard to freeing our people, and we are no closer to being free, independent, on a sovereign territory, secure in our sovereignty and defending ourselves. We're no closer to that today than we were 100 years ago, whether following the run-of-the-mill nationalists, the amorphous nationalists, or the messianic nationalists, or the secular nationalists, or secular pan-Africanists and so forth, or following the integrationists. But when we follow the nationists, the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Revolutionary-Resolutionary Nationists, we freed ourselves immediately from the plantation. We freed others from the plantations. We waged war and forced the end of enslavement. We established independent black towns and so forth. And those lasted up into the so-called 20th century. We have a few that still exist now. And we are descendant from those from that pedigree. It is time for us to pick up where they left off and finish the process of freeing ourselves totally and establishing an independent space that is inclusive of an independent space on the continent of Afuraikai, as well as a sister independent space in the Western Hemisphere. Some of our people will remain in the Western Hemisphere. Some of our people will have a space on the continent, and some will go back and forth. But we will have both, just like we've had even thousands of years ago. This is part of that pedigree. We want to talk about what is revolutionary-resolutionary nationism. First, we have to understand what is revolution, what is resolution. So if you go, we're going to put a link in the chat room for my book, Marenechi, Divine Law, Love, and Divine Hate. And we want to go to section 3 of that text, which lays out the proper definition of revolution and resolution. Hold on one second. We just want to pull that up. We'll put the link in the chat room. If you go to the Nhoma page on our website, you'll see the link to Marenechi. And then when you go to the Marenechi page, you can download the entire book, ebook version for free. And that's the link that we're putting up now. Okay, so that link is up in the chat room right now. Now, if you go to section 3 in Marenechi, Divine Law, Love, and Divine Hate. And of course, when we go through parts 1 of the book and part 2 and so forth, we're showing that the order that regulates creation, that governs creation, is comprised of an expansive and contractive pole. The expansive pole of order, the divine arrangement within which everything operates, the expansive pole of order is divine law. And law and love is the same word in our ancestral languages. It is the same word phonetically, but it's also the same word and concept. Law and love, divine law is the expression of order. So if someone tells you to put something in alphabetical order, that's the charge that you have. But in order to do so, you need to know the laws that govern alphabetical order. So you know the B comes after A, C comes after B, and so forth. When you understand those laws which express order, then you can arrange letters in an alphabetical order. Law is the expression of order. Divine law is the divine expression of divine order. Law is the instrument that allows us to balance our thoughts, intentions, and actions and recognize and align with divine order. So divine law is the expression of divine order. Hate is the impression of divine order. That is the contractive pole of divine order, divine hate. There are male and female deities that govern divine law or love. That is Ma'al, the male deity Ma'al. We've done an 8-part series on that male divinity, proving conclusively what his function in creation is and how he manifests in our various ancestral religious traditions. The male deity is Ma'al, the female divinity is Ma'at. They are the expansive pole of order, which is divine law. The contractive pole of divine order is divine hate. Herubedeti and Sekhmet, called Benna and Abenna in the Akan tradition, Ogun and Iyami Abeni in the Yoruba tradition. These are the male and female forces, contractive forces of divine order. They impress order upon creation and creation's entities. So through law, divine order is expressed. Through hate, divine order is impressed. The lymphatic system in your body, the immune system in your body, these are the agents of divine hate within the body. They impress or imprint upon various cells, organs, and so forth, the parameters within which they need to operate. If they operate outside of those parameters and become, quote-unquote, cancerous, then they are destroyed. So divine hate impresses or imprints upon creation the parameters within which it must operate. Divine hate, that contractive force, contracts around created entities for protection and the stability of the organism. You can have all kinds of, you have 11 major systems in your body. It wouldn't matter if you have a cardiovascular system, a renal system, endocrine system, exocrine system, and all these different systems. If the lymphatic and immune system are not working, your body falls apart. The stability of the body is dependent, and its perpetuity is dependent. Its continuity is dependent upon the lymphatic and immune systems, those contractive forces that defend every cell in the body that is functioning harmoniously. And that's the same with creation. The forces that contract and protect the divine order that has been established through law is perpetuated and protected through divine hate or contraction. So we go through that in volumes 1 and volume 2, or parts 1 and part 2 of this book. Then we get to part 3 to see how that is applied. So we're going to look at, we're going to show you what page. We get to part 3. That's page 26. Now, we say Nyansa is the term for wisdom, intelligence in the tree, the Akan language. We have shown in the first 2 parts of this series that Nyame wa Nyame and Sheshe, or divine order of the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and Great Father, Supreme Being, is comprised of 2 complementary poles, law, love, and hate. We talked about Ma'at and Ma'al and Herubadeti and Sekhmet and so forth. Now, in Nyansa, which is divine wisdom, is comprised of 2 complementary poles, revolution and resolution. Revolution is the expansive pole of wisdom, intelligence, while resolution is the contractive pole of wisdom, intelligence. Then we get into the section San Nisan. A revolution is a complete return. The word is composed of re, meaning back or again, and the root volve, meaning to turn, to roll. To revolve is to return or turn back. When Earth moves around sun and returns to its point of origin, it has made a complete revolution. When an Afuraitkaitnit individual has made a complete revolution, he or she has returned to his or her point of origin, or his or her original nature condition. In the tree language, the Akan language, the term san means to repeat an act, to return. And you find that in the term sankofa and so forth, to return, go and grass. And we go into detail about that notion of what sankofa means. We talk about how we've been removed geographically as well as spiritually and culturally the furthest away, so we need to sankofa, return, go and grasp to our original state, our original condition. The pact we made with Nyame wa Nyame, Amen, Amen, before we entered into the world, return to that pact so we can execute our function in creation. When we return san to our ancestral consciousness and are fed from it, we fully and properly expand our awareness of our position in creation and how to negotiate that position in harmony with Nyame wa Nyame and Sheshe. This is the expansive nature of Nyansa, or wisdom. Through that returning process, that complete revolution, going back to our original point of origin or our original nature or condition, then we draw from that original nature or condition the reservoir of consciousness, the information we need to purify ourselves. That is a complete revolution. A resolution is a complete rectification. The word is composed of re, meaning back or again, and the root solve, which means to loosen, to unravel. It includes the notion of to free from restraint, to vindicate, to clear, to restore, to return to the former state. To resolve is to reduce something back to its former state, its natural form. That's why we have a second meaning of the term Akan, in Akan language for the term san is to loosen, to unfasten, to unravel. The first meaning of san is to return. The second meaning of san, just like revolution, the second meaning of san is to loosen, to unfasten, to unravel, resolution. Once we have expanded our awareness of the truth of our divine function in creation, and its relationship to our place in creation through engaging the San, the revolution process. We then engage the San process to unravel, in order to loosen, unravel, to break up the hold that disorder has taken over our lives. We move to unravel the knots which have blocked the free flow of consciousness and energy necessary for the execution of our divine function as individuals in creation and as a group, as a collective. We move to eradicate the disorder for good. We restore our condition to its former orderly state, because to resolve something is to reduce something back to its former state, its natural form, when it has become disordered. We have effected a complete resolution. When Earth, through revolution, transmits its power through the seasons, it has brought about a complete resolution. When we take the consciousness and energy that we have acquired through revolution, returning to our original condition, and expend it for the purpose of achieving resolution, we vindicate ourselves and our condition. We restore Nsheshe. This is the contractive nature of Nyansa. Through revolution, we return to our original state, our point of origin, our well of consciousness, energy, and ancestral experience to arm ourselves with the necessities, the weapons necessary to rectify conflict. Through resolution, we restore the life situation to its natural former state of harmony with creation. We restore our life circumstances to their former orderly state, the state in which they existed before the interruption of disorder. In that return, we eradicate blockages to our own awareness. In that resolve, we eradicate impediments, people or situations, to our ability to execute our Nkrabeya. The expansive nature of sign to return, revolution allows us to return to express our essence. The contractive nature of sign through resolution allows us to restore, to impress our essence. We return to reclaim who we are and how we are designed to function, how we must function. We resolve by imprinting that knowledge upon our life condition, our present circumstances. We return, San, to retrieve the template for proper living, and we resolve, San, by taking that template and imprinting it upon the current situation, thereby stamping out the disorder and restoring order. Revolution is the expression of wisdom, intelligence. Resolution is the impression of wisdom, intelligence. Through revolution, we revolt. We express our disdain for disorder by challenging it. Through resolution, we resolve. We impress our disdain for disorder by eradicating it. When we challenge relentlessly without compromise. When we eradicate completely without exception. And that includes the whites and their offspring being eradicated completely without exception. So we're talking about the revolutionary and resolutionary poles of divine wisdom, intelligence. When you talk about intelligence, you're talking about revolution and resolution. If somebody is manifesting intelligence or wisdom, we often don't think about revolution and resolution, but that's exactly what it is. If you're trying to figure out a problem, the first thing you do is you return mentally to the well of consciousness, divine wisdom implanted within you by the Supreme Being, and you reach into that, you return to that well of consciousness, you draw forth those resources, that information and so forth that you need. That's the returning or making a complete revolution, turning back revolution. Once you grasp that information through revolution, then you utilize what you have taken to bring resolution to the issue, applying that intelligence or that wisdom to resolve the issue in harmony with order without creating disorder in creation in the process. Intelligence is the manifestation of revolution and resolution. And this is why we show in the text that the male governor of the pole of revolution is the male deity of divine wisdom, which is Tuhuti, The female deity of divine wisdom is the governess of the pole of resolution. Tahuti and Seshat, they work together as the governor and the governess of the pole of divine wisdom. They regulate revolution and resolution. This is foundational to nationism. This is foundational to AMANNE. This is foundational to the success manifest through our ancestresses and ancestors of our pedigree, of our anato, of our circle of descent. Those of our ancestresses and ancestors who actually affected revolution and resolution. Not those who have had ideas about what revolution is, about what nation building is, and have never achieved it in over 150 years. Those who maintained our ancestral religious practices, that stock that we come from, that stock that we are informed by, they achieved revolution and resolution in their lifetimes. Those who lived during enslavement, they freed themselves during their lifetimes. They saw the result of revolution and revolutionary activity, freed themselves, established independent nations such as Dismal Swamp, and lived intergenerationally, raising children and grandchildren free while others were on plantations. Then they went to free others from those plantations as well. Those of our people, after we forced the end of enslavement, after the Civil War and so forth, those who maintained ancestral religious practice, those of our stock of that pedigree, those are the individuals who moved to establish independent black towns, another form of sovereignty in this region of the Western Hemisphere, while other individuals were seeking to integrate with the whites and their offspring and suffering all kinds of indignities based on their race in industrial cities and other cities in the South and so forth. Other people decided, no, we're going to follow the forces in nature. As we've interfaced with them here in the Western Hemisphere, we've learned what plant life, animal life, mineral life to interface with for food as well as medicine. We've learned how to establish ourselves and defend ourselves and so forth. We are going to establish something for ourselves. So they did that, and that took place over the course of the next 100+ years. And now we have come forward to pick up where they left off. And that includes even our intellectual focus and development. Some people, when they deal with quote-unquote consciousness, and of course we did our 3-part series, Ka, Sky, the etymology and cosmology of consciousness, the god Hetep and the goddess Hetepet, and the nature of consciousness, and so forth, giving that proper definition to what consciousness actually is, and talking about and examining the nature and function of the god Hetep and the goddess Hetepet. We went into detail about that, but when we talk about consciousness, many of our people believe that it only comes from one of those other 2 streams of thought, those other quote-unquote pedigrees. Some people following people like Frederick Douglass and the NAACP and that whole integrationist movement, the quote-unquote civil rights movement and so forth, and they're studied in that Negro movement. And they believe that's enriching their consciousness, which of course it is not. But then you have other individuals who study Henry Harlan Garnett or Martin Delaney or a number of different individuals, Marcus Garvey and so forth, even Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X and other people connected to different forms of the pseudo-religion of Islam or Hebrewism or other nonsensical doctrines, Moorishism and so forth. And they put forth this idea, as well as atheism and so forth. They put forth this idea that that's how people come into consciousness. They start studying Pan-African writers or black nationalist writers or movements and so forth, and that's how they come into consciousness. And what we need to do now is just build upon what they built, and that's how we move the conversation and move the people forward. There are people who come from that series of, that stream of thought, those 2 different streams of thought, but we didn't come into consciousness in that fashion. Those of the pedigree of AMANNE, the AMANNE ANATO, the pedigree of nationism, We didn't come into consciousness by studying secular nationalism. We didn't come into consciousness by studying amorphous nationalism. We didn't come into consciousness by studying messianic nationalism. We became aware of that later on. We didn't come into consciousness in that fashion. We came into consciousness through hoodoo. We came into consciousness through juju. We came into consciousness through wanga. We came into consciousness through ingangai. We came into consciousness through grigri and so forth. We came into consciousness by adhering to our ancestral religious tradition, learning of our trustery first and foremost by our ancestresses and ancestors. And then when they directed us to study different and so forth, to confirm what they told us spiritually, then we moved forward to study different texts, study language and so forth, ritual practices, to confirm what we were already engaged in, and therefore we were able to confirm and contextualize what we were already engaged in. When we engage in divination, for example, water gazing in the hoodoo tradition, and then we see water gazing, divinatory practice on the walls of ancient Kemet, and our Nsamanfo, our Nananoman Nsamanfo, our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors show us that what we are doing today is exactly what's being done on the walls of ancient Kemet. We have a detailed understanding because we engage these ritual processes and various other ritual processes and so forth. When we're still speaking the language today in the hoodoo tradition that can be found, of course, in the Akan language, and then we look at the texts of ancient Kemet and the exact same terms designating ritual practices, ritual implements, and so forth, and specific ritual functions that are used in the hoodoo tradition, the hoodoo language and so forth in North America are the exact same terms, of course, in the Akan language, but can be found in the Medutu, the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet, with the exact same meanings. That's a confirmation of what we're already engaged in. So our studies came first and foremost through hoodoo, through juju, through vodou, through wanga, through ngangai, through grigri and so forth, passing that down, engaged in ritual practice, raising our children in these ritual practices, and then when the study began, they simply direct us to different forms of study. Then later on, we come in contact with the writings and movements of integrationists. We come in contact with information about the Black nationalists and Pan-Africanists and so forth, and we can see what they're missing. We can see the trajectory of their movements and why it was doomed from the start, because it was rooted in Eurocentric values, even though they were trying to blacken up those values. That's what happened in the past. We are in the present now. We recognize what has taken place, but when you're intelligent, you move forward intelligently. You recognize the expansive and contractive poles of a Nyansa, of wisdom, revolution, and resolution. You revolt. You return back to your original condition, your original state. You draw forth from that original consciousness you were given by the Supreme Being, and you take that pure, untainted consciousness and utilize it, apply it to the issue so you can restore your condition, your life circumstances to a former orderly state through resolution. This is ancestral religion undergirding revolutionary-resolutionary action. And the proof of that is the success of the pedigree of AMANNE ANATO, the pedigree of nationism in comparison to secular nationalism, amorphous nationalism, messianic nationalism. This is the path that our people have been on since we've been here, those who've been successful. This isn't a new movement, nationism. We're simply giving an English term, nationism, to an ancient term, AMANNE, which we show in the Akan language, but also show in the language of ancient Kemet. We show the Medutu, the hieroglyphs in our book, Odwiraman Afashe, in both volumes. So this is not a new movement. This is the movement that started as soon as we set foot on the shores of North America, set foot in the Western Hemisphere. That AMANNE process began. And then we are descendant from that pedigree, that anato, that circle of descent, that transcarnational and spirit-genetic blood circle of descent. We've inherited that AMANNE ANATO, that pedigree, and we are activating that pedigree now. So whatever other individuals are doing, that's what they're doing. If people remain in integrationism for a short period into the future, you'll see that's what they're going to continue to do until they realize that it is ill-effective, and it was ill-effective from the jump based on its underpinnings socially, cosmologically, and theoretically. The same is true of various forms of black nationalism and Pan-Africanism rooted in Eurocentric dogma. Sometimes that Eurocentric dogma is blackened up. It was doomed from the beginning because the underpinning of the philosophy was Eurocentric, which is disorder. A disordered, blackened up Eurocentric philosophy powered by a desire to see black people free does not mesh. So some people will continue that process into the future for a short period until they begin to realize that it is ill-effective and has been ill-effective for over a century. Then our people will awaken to who they truly are. All of us are descended from these practices of hoodoo and juju and voodoo and so forth. This is in our blood circle. We're talking about aligning with the forces in nature that animate creation, and we align with those forces in nature that embody divine order, how they manifest in this region of the Western Hemisphere, and how we align with them so we can replicate that order in our social structures so we can establish some independence, replicating that of those previously who came before us in that pedigree, who established independence during enslavement, forced the end of enslavement, established independence after enslavement, and now we have the charge to complete the process. And we have no excuse to not complete that process. So this is what we're engaged in. We're making a clear distinction as Odwiraman, the Purified Nation, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut in the Western Hemisphere. We come from that different pedigree. Every black person in reality comes from that pedigree, but they have not contextualized that as of yet. And of course, we are here to properly contextualize that, and that's what that movement is about. That's what the AMANNE movement, the Nationism movement, is about. It's a new but old original movement. Every other movement is a truncated version or a corruption or a fragmented perversion of our original culture. So we need to go back, revolution, make a complete revolution, return to our point of origin so that we can engage in resolution to vindicate ourselves, to free ourselves fully, and reestablish ourselves permanently. So this is what we're dealing with. This is what we wanted to address tonight. When we have the AMANSEM Affairs of the Nation broadcast, it's a little bit different than the other broadcasts. We typically schedule this broadcast for 1 hour just to deal with specific issues that confront us as Odwiraman, the Purified Nation. If you want to learn details about what Odwiraman, the Purified Nation, is, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut in the Western Hemisphere, you can download the free ebook versions of our Odwiraman Afashe and Homa, or book from 13,016. Then also the book from last year, conference 13,017. Of course, they are permanent free downloads on our website. We have a 7-part series that we did on Blog Talk Radio, which you can find on the Blog Talk channel, as well as you can find that 7-part series on our YouTube channel, Odwiraman on YouTube, where we go into detail about those 7 principal values of AMANNE or nationism and the definition of Odwiraman and nation building and so forth. Study those in detail. This is what undergirds everything we're doing. When you look at that ahinasa or triangle that we utilize on the bottom right-hand culture, you have Nanasom, Ancestral Religion. Bottom left-hand corner, you have Amamre, which is ancestral culture. And then the apex of the triangle is Amansesew, nation building, restoration. And that entire structure is AMANNE. That is nationism, the purification of nationalism, but we recognize the Oman, the nation is a living, breathing entity governed by specific abosom. We ourselves within that organal structure, so we need to operate, build, function interdependently, solve our issues, engage in revolution and resolution, so we can draw from that resource of wisdom we need to solve our problems in the present, in the future, as well as cover those issues that have been left unresolved in the past and so forth. This is what we're dealing with. This is also part of the process coming up with regard to our upcoming 2 events. We have the Echisign Conference we talked about that's coming up in March around the equinox, March 24th, March 25th, the Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference. Prior to that, next month, a month from today, 4 weeks from today, or 4 weeks from tomorrow, we're having our first annual Hapi Merit Hibernation Training, Cultural, and Ritual Retreat on Edisto Island in South Carolina, one of the Gullah Islands. We're dealing with Odwiraman, Afurakani manhood, Obatan, Afuraitkaitnit womanhood. We'll have workshops on those 2 books. I'll be conducting the workshop for the Afurakani man at the retreat on Odwiraman, Afurakani manhood based on our book. We'll be going through that entire book and going through the workshop for that. Dr. Iya Adjua will be going through the Obatan, Afuraitkaitnit womanhood book with the sisters, going through that workshop, that training workshop. We'll also have joint workshops on Patah Sasatem and others on that weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So when you look on our page, the Hapi Merit Training, Cultural, and Ritual Retreat, we're building Afurakani manhood, Afuraitkaitnit womanhood from the firm foundation of AMANNE Nationism as Odwiraman, as the Purified Nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. We are purified because we, on one hand, on the surface, some lost some aspect of the culture, but then we purify ourselves in return to our ancestral religious culture, and we utilize that as the foundation, philosophical and cultural, to affect Amanne, to affect nationism, and thus, of course, Amansesew nation building, restoration. So those of you who would like to attend the Hapi Merit retreat, we do have a couple of spaces left, so go directly to our Hapi Merit page on our website, and you can register there and send us an email if you have any questions. We have one call on the phone line. Michiobo, yes. Number 2081, you have a question or comment on the phone line?
Yes, I have a question, Kwesi. I'm trying to find, in regards to a particular piece of work that deals with how to construct an ancestral shrine. I'm not sure if I remember. I'm not sure if it's Hoodoo People that has the text that talks about certain steps. I could be wrong. If you could elaborate.
Okay, so there's one document. If you go, first of all, if you go to YouTube and go to the Nkomre Ancestral Shrine Communication and Liberation, Nkomre is spelled Nkommere, Nkomre Ancestral Shrine Communication and Liberation. That broadcast actually goes through 3 documents. One of them is called Nkomre Ancestral Shrine Communication, where it talks about the establishment of an ancestral shrine, a basic setup, and so forth. And there are a couple of other documents as well, in Sama Nkomre, as well as in Sama Nkomre and the 7 Senses. The other documents in Sama Nkomre, Ancestral Shrines, and Kemet. So if you look on our page, if you look on the, for example, the Nanasom page on our website, ojirafu.com/nanasom.html, NANASOM.html, you'll see those different links to those different articles. The Nkomre Ancestral Shrine Communication article, the Nsama Nkomre Ancestral Shrines in Kemet, the Nsama Nkomre and the 7 Senses, and then we also have Ojirafu and Akwamu Mine, which is an article that includes information on that as well. But the video, in that broadcast, we go through all of those articles in detail. So that gives you that foundation to establish, a basic ancestral shrine setup. Okay, can you still hear me? Okay, I can't hear you, so it might have muted.
Sorry. Hear me?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Sorry. I'm on the page now, and I'm scrolling down, and I'm seeing the Akurma complex so Ankufa. I don't know if I pronounced it right. I'm going to keep going down. Obedima. Okay. So I'm on your page, so I have to probably find it from there. Okay. All right. Well.
Right. So you can go to the on the Nanasom page.
Okay.
That's one of the pages where.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Thank you, Madase.
Okay. Yemi Aseda. We appreciate the call. One other piece that we wanted to mention, we have a couple of calls left, then we'll be done, but one other piece, of course, with regard to nationism, nation building, restoration. When we say Amansesew, which is nation, Aman, and Sesu means restoration. So when we talk about nation building, of course, we're talking about the restoration of our Aman nation. So that's why we say nation building, restoration. When we say Amansesew, the setting a nation, a right of restoring a nation. Part of that process is the institutionalization of our values, training institutions for, schools for engineering, schools for agriculture, schools for curing disease and so forth, but also cultural institutions, ritual institutions. Of course, the ritual institutions are the practice of ancestral religion, so we can learn how to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order, learn from the forces of nature, what's in harmony with order, learn from our ancestresses and ancestors the proper means by which to navigate our way through life so we don't create disorder within ourselves or within our community, so our community doesn't, our immunity as a community is not compromised. When there's conflict in the community, then your immunity is compromised. People from the outside can easily attack when you have conflict and you're attacking one another internally and there's an internal conflict. When you engage in ancestral religious practice, that restores harmony, restores balance to thoughts, intentions, and actions. You can resolve conflicts, and then you're establishing sound systems of governance and jurisprudence based on those ancestral religious values. And part of that process is institutionalizing such systems of sound systems of jurisprudence and systems of governance and so forth. But also, that's the ritual piece, governmental piece, but also establishing cultural institutions when you're conveying knowledge of the culture, conveying protocols of the culture, so when people recognize the value of the culture and the protocols that went into establishing the culture and establishing the nation and why we have a nation and why it's valuable and what would happen if we did not have that and how we ended up in enslavement and how we ended up, suffering under economic and political and social domination and so forth, the values of establishing our independence and protecting and defending our independence. When people have an understanding of that, then they will seek to defend the nation, perpetuate the nation, defend the protocols, and perpetuate the protocols intergenerationally. The way you do that is establishing cultural institutions to transmit the knowledge of the culture and therefore the values of the culture, the values of our way of life and our identity. One of the major ways we do that, of course, not only through broadcast, that's through audio, teaching, the publishing of our books. We have 29 books out. All of the ebook versions of our books are free. And, of course, we have the softcover versions as well, which you can purchase, and that supports our work. And that also supports our entrepreneurship option, that people can purchase our books wholesale and sell them retail and begin to work for themselves and generate income for themselves immediately as independent entrepreneurs, because we promote independence. For Afuraitkaitnut people, we're not just talking about that, we actually do that. But also part of that process is teaching through the visual medium. And what we have done is we're in the process of creating a documentary film, Amarukako Adebisa Ajumadi, African American Ancestral Divination Project, and that is showcasing the forms of divination that we maintained in our blood circles here in the Western Hemisphere since we were forced here over 300 years, in the Hoodoo tradition, Juju tradition, Voodoo tradition, Wanga tradition, and Gangan tradition. These are the forms of oracular divination that guided our people on the best means by which to wage war against the whites and their offspring and force the end of enslavement. We're in the process of that. We've had a crowdfunding effort for the past, literally this week made 1 year. Over the past, we were at 48% about a week and a half ago. Because of a little surge in support, we have pushed beyond 51% over the course of the past 10 days. We would like to get to 100%. We've had about 107 people over the past year who have contributed, about 15 people per month. At the same time, we have about 4,000 downloads of our free books on a monthly basis, over 55,000 downloads over the past 12 months. So if you have never had a chance to support our work, please go to the fundraising page. You see the link on our website, on different pages, and on Facebook to our film. Once we get to that 100%, we can complete the filming process within about 30 days, and we can have the film released. This is part of that institutional effort, that institution building, restoring the consciousness of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit identity, and specifically for us, our locative identity as Odwiraman, the Purified Nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere, restoring that consciousness to our people. So once we're grounded in who we are, then we make decisions about how we're going to move forward in every aspect of our lives. That is part of that institutional effort. So when you support the film, that's what you're supporting, and of course it will be widely distributed amongst our people all over this country and of course in other parts of the world, but this is to empower our people with accurate information about Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit culture, trustery, ritual practices, because there's a great deal of misinformation out here locking our people into foolishness like blackening up Christianity or Moorishism or Islam or atheism or pseudo-spirituality, pseudo-metaphysics and all of this other nonsense. And all of that foolishness is by design to keep our people distracted and disjointed and dysfunctional. So we thank those 107 people who contributed over the past 12 months, but we do have hundreds of people who haven't had a chance to support our work over the past few years. This is the perfect opportunity to do so. This will empower not only our people who are, in the community at this point, but those people who are ready to return to their ancestral religious practices. And of course, in reality, we're always ready to return to that because we never should have left it consciously. So the cry while the soul, the divine consciousness of every Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit individual is always drawing them back towards their way of life, which is in harmony with divine order and their ancestral religious practices. We simply need to contextualize that for our people so we can all move forward harmoniously. So if you go to the fundraiser page for Amadu Kapo Adebisa, we can reach that goal just as we crossed 51%, from 48 to 51% in a few days. We can get to 100% within a day, with the hundreds of people who listen to the broadcast and download the broadcast. We've had thousands of downloads of just our broadcast over the past few weeks. So we have the capacity. This is time to starve the beast and feed the pride and move that piece forward. So we have one more call on the phone line. Michelle on the phone line, number 8162. You had a question or a comment?
What's up, Brother Quincy?
What's up?
Question. I have a comment. I know it's a little after the fact, but I just wanted to say congratulations on your 300th broadcast. And Madase for your consistency and dedication to your work.
Madase, we appreciate that. Yes. Sister is talking about just 2 days ago on Abinada on our Ojira broadcast. This past Tuesday, this was the 300th broadcast. We started broadcasting a few years ago on a Benada on a Tuesday, the first Ojira broadcast, and we reached 300 this past Benada Tuesday on Ojira. So yes, we're moving that conversation forward, moving the culture forward, purifying concepts and so forth, and that includes this whole notion of AMANNE Nationism. We're moving back into the proper direction. So, Yedase, we appreciate your support.
Medase. It's
And so all of the broadcasts, all 300, this actually is number 302. All 302 broadcasts are on our Blog Talk Radio channel, blogtalkradio.com/og.fo. So you can access them at any time. And many of them as well are on our YouTube channel, og.fo on YouTube. You can access them at any time and so forth. And then with regard to the books, so that's the audio portion of the teaching process, the institutional process. With regard to our 29 books on our page, the ebook versions are free downloads, as we said, because even if our people do not have money, they need to be able to access this information because it's too critical to hold it for ransom. So you can access the ebook versions. If you support the work that we do, you can make a purchase of the softcover versions of our books, and we have 29 books, and they all range between $8 and $11. Most of them are either $9 or $10. That's the printed portion with regard to teaching and education and so forth. And then, like we said, now we're introducing the visual component, which captures the majority of our people. There's a certain percentage of our people who are eager to sit down and study, read, highlight books, incorporate these things into their lives. There's a certain segment of the population who doesn't mind listening and studying the information once they get a chance to sit down and absorb the information found in the broadcast and follow the text that we dissect in the broadcast, because you can download those texts for free and follow along and so forth and incorporate those things. But then there's a larger percentage of our people who are stimulated visually. So if they see a film, it's much easier for them to absorb right away, and that may lead them and interest them to, after seeing the film, then going and sitting down and studying the work that we have published. It's also good for children to be able to see those images. That's the best way to inform in a holistic, intense fashion through the visuals and so forth. So this is one of the reasons we're moving forward with the first documentary film. So again, go to the page, take a few seconds, a few minutes. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes to actually make a contribution via that fundraising effort. And then once you make a contribution, you can see the movement that we're making. You can track the movement, and you'll look over the past 9 or 10 days, as we said, we moved from 48% to 51% with about 107 people. But we have thousands of people. We have over 4,400, almost 4,500 subscribers on YouTube. So just from a small percentage, 10% of the people who subscribe on YouTube, even if only 400 people made a contribution as they're listening to this broadcast, and if the other 4,100 people decided not to make a contribution, but if just 10% or, even just 400 people, less than 10%, 400 people made that contribution right now as you're listening, whether it's the live broadcast or the archive, then we will reach the goal instantaneously, within hours. And we have that capacity. Remember, we must starve the beast and feed the pride. If we do not support our own businesses by default, we're supporting the whites and their offspring and serving their interests, which is financing our own oppression. So we must starve the beast and feed the pride. So again, Yerase, we thank you for tuning in to this broadcast. And Yebeshiabio, we will meet again. That's up.